It's always a pleasure for me to be back in the company, even virtually, of my friends at Trinity International University, and especially my friends at the Center for Bioethics and Human Dignity. And what an honor to be speaking in a lecture series named for the great Dr. John Kilner, a man who has compiled over his lifetime an extraordinary record of work in Christian bioethics and who has given profound Christian witness. Dr. Kilner is one of the leading bioethicists of the modern period. In a certain sense, one of the founding fathers of bioethics, who belongs up there with figures such as Leon Cass and Paul Ramsey and Daniel Callahan and the other great founders, Han Jonas, Gilbert Meilander, the great founders of the tradition of bioethics, and especially among those who are operating self consciously as religious or Christian bioethicists. So it's a pleasure and an honor to be with you this evening. My title and topic this evening is Natural Law, God, and Human Dignity. One's knowledge of natural law, like all knowledge, begins with experience, but it does not end or even tarry there. Knowing is an activity, an intellectual activity to be sure, but an activity nonetheless. We all have the experience of knowing, of understanding, of grasping things, of moving from curiosity to knowledge. But to know is not merely to experience. It's not a passive thing where information just gets transferred and imprinted onto one's mind. No, rather, knowing is a complex and dynamic activity. The role of experience in the activity of knowing is to supply data on which the inquiring intellect works in the cause of achieving understanding. Insights, what we do when we know we have insights, insights are insights into data. They are, as the philosophical theologian Bernard Lonergan brilliantly demonstrated by inviting readers to observe and reflect on their own ordinary intellectual operations, the fruit of a dynamic and integrated process of experiencing, understanding, and judging. So then, what are the data supplied by experience that are at the foundation of what, following Aristotle, I will call practical judgments? That is to say, insights that constitute knowledge of natural law, knowledge of reasons for acting. Well, they are the objects of intelligibly choice-worthy possibilities. Possibilities, that is to say, inasmuch as they provide reasons for action of a certain sort, that is more than merely instrumental reasons, we grasp not as bare possibilities, things we could do, but as opportunities, things that are worth doing, things that there is a point to doing, things that there is an intelligible point to doing, not just as means to other ends, but things that are worth having, doing, participating in for their own sakes. In our experience of true friendship, for example, we grasp by what is ordinarily an effortless exercise of our practical reason the intelligible point of having and being a friend. We understand that friendship is desirable not merely for instrumental reasons, though friendship can have great instrumental value. No, it's not just for instrumental reasons. Indeed, a purely instrumental friendship would be no friendship at all. We all understand that. What makes for a true friendship is where the friends value each other and their relationship for its own sake. And most people easily see the point of friendship not merely as a means to other ends, not merely for instrumental purposes, but for its own sake. Now, the insight could be blocked. Consider the fictional, although there are corresponding real cases, the fictional case of Ebenezer Scrooge. He doesn't see or quite see any non-instrumental reasons. He doesn't see the non-instrumental point of relationships with other people. He doesn't see the good of friendship as a true thing, friendship for its own sake. Bah humbug. Until what blocks his understanding is removed. When the ghosts of Christmas past and Christmas present and Christmas yet to come visit him, they are able to show him the wounds that caused the blockage that prevented him from grasping the intelligible point of friendship. Not as a means to other ends or a mere means to other ends or just a means to other ends, but as something worth having for its own sake. And of course, once he has the insight, he becomes a very good friend to his many friends. Because we grasp the intelligible point of having or being a friend, and we understand that the point of friendship is friendship itself, and certainly not goals extrinsic to friendship, to which the activity of friendship is a mere means, we reasonably judge that friendship is intrinsically valuable. It's an intrinsic good. We know that friendship is a constitutive and irreducible aspect of our well-being and fulfillment as human beings, as the kinds of creatures we are, as social animals. And that precisely as such, that is to say, as a more than merely instrumental good, an intrinsic value, friendship provides a reason for action of the sort that requires for its intelligibility as a reason no further or deeper reason or sub-rational motivating factor to which it's means. But friendship isn't the only basic human good, the only more than merely instrumental reason we have for acting, the only intrinsic value. Shift our focus now to the experience of knowing itself, to that activity, the activity of knowing, of seeking knowledge, seeking understanding, what we're actually about right in this evening's session together, seeking understanding, trying to understand more deeply natural law, God, and human dignity. In our experience of wonder and curiosity, of raising questions and devising strategies for obtaining correct answers, of executing those strategies by carrying out lines of inquiry in science or in social science or in history or in sociology, what have you, of achieving insights, even in our ordinary experience outside of the academic context, we grasp, again, by what is for most people, in most circumstances, an effortless exercise of our practical reason, the intelligible point of searching for truth, searching for understanding, searching for knowledge, and finding it, of knowing. We understand then that knowledge, though it may have tremendous instrumental value as well, just as friendship may have tremendous instrumental value in addition to its intrinsic worth, is indeed intrinsically valuable as well. Its most fundamental value is its intrinsic and not merely its instrumental value, though it may have great instrumental value. To be attentive, informed, thoughtful, clear-headed, careful, critical, and judicious in one's thinking and in judging is to be inherently enriched in a key dimension of human life. We reasonably judge the activity of knowing, then, to be an intrinsic, or what I've called a basic human good, a constitutive and irreducible aspect of our flourishing as human beings. Like friendship and a number of other types of activity, knowledge, knowing, provides a reason for acting that requires for its intelligibility as a reason no further or deeper reason or sub-rational motivating factor to which it's a means. Knowledge of natural law, then, is not innate. It does not swing free of experience or of the data provided by experience. Even when it is easily achieved, practical knowledge, knowledge of natural law, knowledge of our basic reasons for acting, is an achievement. It is the fruit of insights, which, like all insights, in science, in math, in historiography, and sociology, like all insights, are insights into data, data which are supplied by experience. The insight, the knowledge that friendship or knowledge itself is intrinsically humanly fulfilling is ultimately rooted in our elementary experience of the activities of friendship and knowing. Apart from those experiences, there would simply be no data on which practical reason could work, could operate to yield understanding of the intelligible point and thus the value of friendship or knowledge or aesthetic achievement or appreciation or the acquisition of valuable skills, as in chess or ballet or football or what have you, and the judgment that these activities are intrinsic fulfillments of the human person, and as such, objects of the primary principles of practical reason, which, following Thomas Aquinas, I'll call the basic precepts of natural law. Now, of course, not all practical knowledge is, strictly speaking, moral knowledge. That is, knowledge of moral norms and their correct applications. Though all moral knowledge is practical knowledge, that is, knowledge of what is to be done. It is, or centrally includes, knowledge of principles for the direction and guidance of action. Yet knowledge of the most fundamental practical principles directing action toward what is intelligibly choice-worthy, what's worthwhile for its own sake, the basic human goods, and away from their privations, though not strictly speaking knowledge of moral norms, that comes later, is foundational to the generation and identification of such norms, of moral norms. And that's because moral norms, whether at the most general level or more specifically, whether they're norms like do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, don't do something in itself evil, even for the sake of good consequences, the good end doesn't justify the bad means, or more specific norms, don't lie, don't steal, don't commit adultery, or very, very specific moral norms like don't hit your sister. Norms of morality are specifications of the integral directiveness or prescriptivity of the various basic aspects of human well-being and fulfillment, the basic human goods, those most basic reasons for action, that together constitute what we might call the ideal of complete or integral human flourishing. So moral norms are principles that guide our actions in line with the primary practical principles, the basic precepts of natural law, integrally conceived, taken together, so that our action is guided rationally and not deflected by sub-rational motivations we may have for doing things that are contrary to reason, contrary to practical reason, contrary to what's reasonable, and in that sense, contrary to the human good, and in that sense, immoral. So if the first principle of practical reason, not of morality here now, but if the first principle of practical reason is, as Aquinas says it is, good is to be done and pursued, and bad or evil, malum, is to be avoided, then the first principle of morality, morality being the body of norms that are specifications of the integral directiveness of the first principles of practical reason, might be formulated as follows. One ought always to act and choose, to otherwise will, in a way that is compatible with a will toward integral human fulfillment, toward the fulfillment of all in all the respects of our human being. And just as the first principle of practical reason is specified, as Aquinas says, by identifying the various irreducible aspects of human well-being and fulfillment, namely friendship, knowledge, aesthetic appreciation, skillful performance, religion, virtue, and so forth, so too the first principle of morality is specified by identifying the norms of conduct that are entailed by an open-hearted love of the human good, that is, the good of human persons, taken as a whole. Because remember, the human good, human goods, the various aspects of human well-being and fulfillment that are the constitutive aspects of our lives as human beings. The human goods are not platonic forms off in some transcendent realm. They are the concrete goods that can be realized by choosing an action, the concrete goods of flesh and blood human beings in the various dimensions of our lives as biological creatures, as intellectual creatures, as relational or social creatures, as moral creatures with responsibility, who can be held accountable, all the various dimensions of our lives as human beings. Now I want to address the question of natural law and human rights. A natural law theory of natural law, is a critical reflective account of the constitutive aspects of the well-being and fulfillment of human persons and the communities they form at all levels, from the basic community of the family on up. Such a theory, a natural law theory, will propose to identify principles of right action. Those are the moral principles, specifying the first and most general principle of morality, which, as I said, could be formulated as one should choose and otherwise will in ways that are compatible with a will toward integral human fulfillment. Among these principles are respect for rights people possess simply by virtue of their humanity. That's what human rights are. Rights we possess not by virtue of some achievement, not by virtue of some game we won or contest we prevailed in, not because of our beauty or size or age or race or anything else. No, rights we have simply in virtue of our humanity, rights which, as a matter of justice, other people, are bound to respect, and governments are bound not only to respect, but also, to the extent possible, to protect. Now, natural law theorists of my particular ilk, my school of thought, understand human fulfillment, the human good, as variegated. It's not monistic. There's not just one human good. There aren't a set of human goods that are reducible to a single good. There are many irreducible dimensions of human well-being, constitutive aspects of human well-being and fulfillment. Now, to say that, to note that the human good is variegated, there are many different irreducible constitutive aspects of our well-being and fulfillment as human beings, is certainly not to deny that human nature is determinate. The human goods are the goods of creatures with a human nature. If our nature were different, the good would be different. The goods are fulfillments of our nature, aspects of our fulfillment with the nature we have. So, to acknowledge the diversity of human goods is to affirm, not to deny, our human nature, but to affirm that our nature, though determinate, is complex. We are animals, to be sure, biological creatures, organisms, but also rational animals. Aristotle hit the nail on the head with that understanding of what the human being is, a rational animal. Our integral good includes, to be sure, our bodily well-being, our health, our physical vitality, but also our intellectual and our social and our moral and spiritual well-being. Moreover, we are individuals, we come packaged as individuals, body and mind, but friendship and sociability are constitutive aspects of our flourishing. So though we are individuals whose fulfillment, whose integral fulfillment, whose complete fulfillment involves relationships with other people, not simply with each of the parties to the relationship treating the other as a means to an end, but where the relationships are understood as valuable for their own sake. They are intrinsically fulfilling of us as social beings. Now, by reflecting on the goods of human nature, especially those most immediately pertaining to social life or political life, natural law theorists propose to arrive at sound judgments regarding principles of justice, including those principles of justice that we call human rights. That's what human rights are, principles of justice. Not all principles of justice are human rights or can be framed in terms of human rights, but human rights, whatever they are, whatever concretely they are, the right not to be killed or treated as a mere means or what have you, human rights are principles of justice. Now, in light of what I've already said about how natural law theorists understand human nature and the human good, it should be no surprise to learn that natural law theorists typically reject both strict individualism of the sort of Ayn Randian or extreme libertarian sort and collectivism, socialism, and other sorts of collectivist ideologies. Individualism, the radical sort of individualism, overlooks the intrinsic value of human sociability and tends mistakenly to view human beings atomistically. It fails to account for the intrinsic value of friendship and other aspects of human sociability, reducing all relationships to means by which the partners collaborate with a view to more fully or efficiently achieving their individual goals and objectives. Collectivism compromises the dignity of human beings by tending to instrumentalize and subordinate them and their well-being to the interests of larger social units, the community, the state, the Volk, the fatherland, the Führer, the future communist utopia, what have you. Now, individualist and collectivist theoreticians have theories of justice and human rights, but they are, as I see it, deeply flawed theories, profoundly unsatisfactory theories. They are rooted in important misunderstandings of human nature and the human good. Neither, I think, neither the radical individualist nor the collectivist can do justice to the key concept. That is the concept of the human person. That is a rational animal, as Aristotle says, who is a locus of intrinsic value and as such an end in himself, who may never legitimately be treated by others as a mere means, but whose well-being intrinsically includes relationships with others and memberships in communities, beginning with the family, in which he or she, as a matter of justice, has both rights and responsibilities or obligations. Human rights exist or obtain if it is the case that there are principles of practical reason directing us to act or abstain from acting in certain ways out of respect for the well-being and dignity of persons whose legitimate interests may be affected by what we do. Human rights are principles of justice. Principles of justice are moral principles. Moral principles are specifications of the basic aspects of human well-being and fulfillment. The first principles of practical reason, the basic precepts of natural law. Now, are there such principles? I certainly believe that there are human rights. They cannot be overridden by considerations of utility. I think the human rights advocates and activists are right to reject utilitarianism. That's a doctrine, as smart utilitarians understand, that's a doctrine that's incompatible with utilitarianism. My strongly utilitarian colleague Peter Singer here at Princeton would be the first to tell you that. At a very general level, these basic rights, these human rights, direct us, in Kant's phrase, to treat human beings always as ends and never as means only. Now, when we begin to specify this general norm, we identify important negative duties, such as the duty, give just a non-controversial example, at least non-controversial these days, example, the duty not to enslave people. That's a negative right. There's a right not to be enslaved. There's this negative duty, a duty, don't do that to people, don't enslave people. Now, although we don't need to put the matter in terms of rights, it is perfectly reasonable and I believe helpful to speak of a right against being enslaved and to speak of slavery as a violation of human rights. While opposing slavery isn't controversial today, slavery goes on today. There is still slavery in the world, much of it, much more than people want to acknowledge. The human trafficking trade is a deep and extensive reality and a scandal and a horror and a violation of human rights. The right against being enslaved, right violated by the human traffickers, is a right that people have not by virtue of being members of a certain race or sex or class or ethnic group or tribe, but simply in virtue of our humanity. It's in that sense that it is a human right. But there are, in addition to negative duties and their corresponding rights, certain positive duties. And these too can be articulated and discussed in the language of rights, though here it is especially important that we be clear about by whom and how a given right or putative right is to be honored. Sometimes it's said, for example, that education or healthcare is a human right, and it is not unreasonable to speak this way. Those are intelligible claims, I think even correct claims. But much more needs to be said if such claims are to be actually meaningful. Who is supposed to provide healthcare or education or what have you, whatever positive good the subject of the right is, to whom? Why should those persons or institutions be the providers? That's not a question that's meant to cast doubt on positive rights. It simply is to say that to be meaningful, we've got to say about those claims, why should these persons, what are the reasons for these persons to be providing healthcare or education or whatever positive good to those persons? What place should the provision of education or healthcare occupy on a list of social and political priorities, given scarce resources? Is it better for education or healthcare to be provided by governments under socialized systems, or by private providers in markets, or by some combination of public and private? Does it have to be the same for all cultures and societies? Do circumstances, traditions, histories, understandings, particular needs matter? Now, these questions go beyond the mere application of moral principles. We can't solve them simply by adverting to moral principles. They require, in addition to moral understanding, prudential judgment in light of the contingent circumstances people face in a given society at a given point in time or its history. Often there is not a single uniquely correct for all times and all places answer to the questions. The answer to each question can lead to further questions, and the problems can be extremely complex, far more complex than the issue of, say, slavery, where once a right has been identified and its universality and the basic terms of its application are very clear. Everybody has a moral right not to be enslaved. Everybody. It's an absolute. And everybody has an obligation as a matter of strict justice to refrain from enslaving others. Governments have a moral obligation to respect and protect the right against being enslaved, and correspondingly to enforce the obligation. Stop people from enslaving others. Punish them if they do or try to do that. Now, what I've said so far will, I hope, provide a pretty good idea of how I think we ought to go about identifying human rights, positive rights or negative rights. But in each case, the argument obviously needs to be made, and in many cases, especially in the cases of positive rights, there are complexities to the argument, multiple complexities, sometimes complexities built upon complexities. Now, one human right, basic human right, that almost all natural law theorists would say belongs in the set of human rights is the right of an innocent person not to be directly killed or maimed, not to be targeted, even in, say, justified wars. This is a right that is violated when someone makes the death or injury of another person the precise object of his action. Lay aside just for the moment the interesting debate among natural law theorists as well as others about the death penalty. But this basic right, not to be directly killed or maimed, is the right that grounds the norm, as I said, against targeting non-combatants, even in justified wars. and of course against abortion, euthanasia, the killing of hostages, and so forth. Now, of course, in the case of abortion, some people argue that human beings in the embryonic or fetal stages of development do not yet qualify as persons and so do not possess human rights. And in the case of euthanasia, some argue that permanently comatose or severely cognitively disabled or demented people do not or no longer qualify as rights bearers. Now, I think these claims are mistaken, but I won't here go into my reasons for holding that the moral status of a human being does not depend on his or her age or size or stage of development or mental condition or condition of dependency or location or any other contingent factor. I presented this argument in great detail in numerous writings, including in the book that Dr. Sleesman kindly mentioned that I wrote with Christopher Tollefson, Embryo: A Defense of Human Life. Here, I only want to say that people who do not share with me the conviction that human beings in early stages of development and in severely debilitated, cognitively disabled conditions are rights bearers may nevertheless agree that whoever qualifies as a person is protected by the norm against the direct killing of human beings, or at least the direct killing of innocent human beings. Now, the natural law account or understanding of human rights that I've here been sketching is connected with a particular understanding of human dignity. Under that understanding, the natural human capacities for reason and freedom are fundamental to the dignity of human beings, the dignity protected by human rights, positive and negative. The basic goods of human nature are the goods of a rational creature, a creature who, unless impaired or prevented from doing so, naturally develops and exercises capacities for deliberation, judgment, choice, and action. These capacities are godlike, albeit, of course, in a limited way. In fact, from the theological vantage point in the Jewish and Christian traditions, these features make human beings share in a certain sense. They constitute a certain sharing, limited to be sure, but real, in divine power. This is what is meant, it must be what is meant, by the otherwise extraordinarily puzzling biblical teaching that human beings, man, is made in the very image and likeness of God. After all, it can't be that God has 5 fingers on each of 2 hands and hair on his head and a nose. If we're God-like, if we're made in the image and likeness of God, it must be that, like God, we have agency. We can act for reasons freely and not simply by compulsion or on instinct like a brute animal. But whether or not one recognizes biblical authority or believes in a personal God, it's true that human beings possess a power traditionally ascribed to divinity, namely the power of an agent to cause what the agent is not caused to cause. This is the power to envisage a possible state of affairs that does not now exist, to grasp the intelligible point, the value of bringing it into existence, and then to act by choice and not merely by impulse or instinct, as a brute animal might, to bring it into being. Now, that state of affairs may be anything from the development of an intellectual skill or the attainment of an item of knowledge, to the creation or critical appreciation of a work of art, or to the establishment of a friendship. Its moral or cultural significance may be great, or far more commonly, comparatively minor. We go through the day acting freely, on reason, being agents, doing things that brute animals can't do. So it doesn't have to be some profound thing. Just in our ordinary living, we exhibit, we exemplify, we act on these godlike powers of reason and freedom. What matters for the point I'm now making is not whether any particular action is of profound significance. It is that the action is a product of reason and freedom. It is the fruit of deliberation, judgment, and choice. Now, of course, a further question will present itself to the mind of anyone who recognizes the God-likeness of our capacities for rationality and freedom, capacities that are immaterial in nature and therefore must be described, or at least might be described as spiritual, in any event, they're not material. That question is whether beings capable of such powers, of exercising such powers, could exist apart from a source, a divine source and ground of their being. So one finds in the affirmation of these powers, powers we all experience, we all understand from our personal experience. So one finds in the affirmation of these powers a decisive ground for the rejection of materialism, and one discerns the basis of an openness to and even the roots of an argument for theism. But more on that point in just a few minutes. Now, what about the authority for this view of human nature, the human good, human dignity, and human rights? Natural law theorists are interested in the intelligible reasons people have for their choices and actions. That's what natural law theory is about, the identification of reasons for action, the most fundamental reasons and any reasons following from their integral directiveness or prescriptivity. We are particularly interested in reasons that can be identified, grasped, understood, defended without appeal to any authority apart from the authority of reason itself. Now, this is not by any means to deny that it is often by appeal to authority that we understand certain things. It's not to deny that it is often reasonable to recognize and submit to authority, religious authority, for example, or secular, for example, legal authority, in deciding what to do and not do. Indeed, natural law theorists have made important contributions, been in the forefront of helping us to understand why and how it can sometimes be not only a good thing to do, but even morally required to submit to and be guided in our actions by authority of various sorts, such as legal authority, the authority of law. Think, for example, those of you who've studied the philosophy of authority, you might think for the work of Yves Simon or my own teacher, John Finnis. But even here in the area where we have good reasons, perhaps even conclusive reasons, even moral reasons to submit to authority in certain areas, the special concern of natural law theorists is with the reasons people have for recognizing and honoring claims to authority. We do not simply appeal to authority to justify authority. One might then ask whether human beings are in fact rational in anything more than an instrumental sense. Can we, as I'm assuming we can, as I'm presupposing we can, discern any genuine, intelligible reasons for human choices and actions? Now, of course, everybody recognizes that some ends or purposes pursued through human action are intelligible, at least insofar as they provide means to other ends. For example, people work to earn money, and their doing so is perfectly rational. Money is a valuable means to a great many important ends. Nobody thinks it's intrinsically valuable. If you can't do something with it, you can't buy something with it, it doesn't give you status, it doesn't give you something, it's not worth anything in itself. Yet no one fails to understand, no one denies or doubts its instrumental value. The question, though, is whether some ends or purposes are intelligible as providing more than merely instrumental reasons for acting. Are they intrinsic, in other words, as well as instrumental goods? Certain skeptics in the tradition of thinkers such as Hobbes and Hume deny that there are intelligible ends or purposes that make possible rationally motivated action. For this school of thought, the ultimate motivation for all actions is subrational, and reason's role is purely instrumental. Hobbes captures this idea with his claim that the thoughts are to the desires, the intellect is to the desires, as scouts and spies to range abroad and find the way to the thing desired. Or Hume expresses it in that colorful line of his where he says that reason is and ought only to be the slave of the passions and may pretend to no office other than to serve and obey them. The purely instrumental understanding or theory of practical reason. Natural law theorists, by contrast, hold that friendship, knowledge, critical aesthetic appreciation, the development of skills and the exercise of skills, again, in a range of things, chess, ballet, football, you name it, and certain other ends or purposes are indeed intrinsically valuable. They provide intelligible reasons for acting that don't require, for their intelligibility, any deeper reason or subrational motivating factor to which they are mere means. These ends or purposes are intelligibly choice-worthy, not simply as ends and as means to other ends, but as ends in themselves. They cannot be reduced to, nor can their intelligible appeal be accounted for exclusively in terms of subrational motivators such as emotion, feeling, desire, and the like. These basic human goods, as I've called them, are constitutive aspects of the well-being and fulfillment of human persons in the communities they form, and they thereby provide the foundations of moral judgments, including our judgments pertaining to justice and human rights. The foundation of much of our thinking, of our rationally motivated thinking, are things that we want not simply as matters of brute fact, but we want them because we see the point, we grasp the point, we understand the worth of having them, where the worth is not as means to other ends, or not exclusively or merely as means to other ends, but as ends in themselves. Now, of course, there are people today who embrace philosophical or ideological doctrines that deny the human capacities that I'm maintaining are at the core of human dignity. They adopt a purely instrumental and essentially non-cognitivist view of practical reason. They think all our reasoning in the practical domain, all our reasoning toward action, really is just reason serving as Hume's slave of the passions. And they argue, therefore, they're finally required to argue, that the human experience of deliberation, judgment, and choice is illusory. The ends people pursue, they insist, are ultimately given by these non-rational motivating factors, the feeling, emotion, desire, what Hume called the passions. Truly rationally motivated action, they argue or maintain or presuppose, is just not possible for creatures like us. We're not godlike in that way. There are no more than merely instrumental reasons. Now, if proponents of this non-cognitivist and subjectivist view of human action were right, then it seems to me the entire business of ethics is a charade, and human dignity would just have to be consigned to the category of a myth, a lie. But I don't think they are right. It can't be squared with our own experience and understanding of friendship and knowledge and other ends or purposes as providing intelligible reasons for our actions. Indeed, I don't think that proponents of the non-cognitivist and subjectivist view of human action can give any account of the norms of rationality to which they must themselves appeal in making the case against reason and freedom that is consistent with the denial that people are capable of more than merely instrumental rationality and true freedom of choice, freedom of the will. Now, none of this is to say or deny that emotion figures in human action. I'm not denying that at all. Of course, in all of our action, emotion figures, it plays a role. And on certain occasions, it plays the primary role. It does the primary work of motivation. My claim isn't that no action has feeling or emotion as part of its motivation. What I maintain is that people have and sometimes act on whatever emotional motives they might have, reasons, basic reasons for their actions, reasons provided by ends they understand as humanly fulfilling and desire precisely as such. These ends too figure in human motivation. Not only do we want things for reasons, but for the intellective grasp of the intelligible point of the end or purpose or goal, we would not have any effective desire for it. Now, if I and other natural law theorists are correct in affirming that human reason can identify human rights as genuine grounds of obligation to others, how can we explain or understand widespread failures to recognize and respect human rights and other moral principles? If there's anything about human history and human nature that we do know, it's that people violate other people's rights all the time. People behave immorally all the time. People behave unjustly all the time. It's a constant in human affairs, constant in human history, constant today, across cultures, over time. Well, as human beings, we are rational animals, but we are, of course, imperfectly rational. We are prone to making intellectual and moral mistakes and capable of behaving grossly unreasonably, especially when deflected by powerful emotions that run contrary to the demands of reasonableness. So sometimes we just don't know what the right thing to do is, or we assume that the wrong thing to do is actually the right thing to do. Sometimes we're just deflected into the wrong thing, even if at some level we know what the right thing to do is by the powerful pull of features of ourselves that compete with our intellects, compete with our sense of right and wrong as rational principles. Now, Christians have a name for this going astray, this going wrong. We call it sin. And there's another name, fallenness. We are fallen creatures, frail, fallible, fallen creatures. We suffer weakness of the will and darkness of intellect, even when following our consciences, as we are morally bound to do. We can go wrong. A judgment of conscience may nevertheless be erroneous. Now, of course, sometimes people fail to recognize and respect human rights because they have self-interested motives for doing so. In most cases of exploitation, for example, the fundamental error is moral, not intellectual. I would imagine that the human traffickers in most cases are people who certainly understand at some level what they're doing is wrong, but they do it anyway. In some cases, though, intellectual and moral failures are closely connected. Selfishness, partisanship, prejudice, vanity, avarice, lust, ill will, and other delinquencies, greed, can, in ways that are sometimes quite subtle, impede sound ethical judgments, including judgments pertaining to human rights. Whole cultures or subcultures can be infected with moral failings that blind large numbers of people to truths about justice and human rights. And ideologies hostile to these truths will almost always be both causes and effects of these failings. Consider, for example, the case of slavery in the antebellum American South. The ideology of white supremacy was both a cause of many people's blindness to the wickedness of slavery and an effect of the exploitation and degradation of its victims. I promised that I would return to the question of natural law and God, and let me do that now. What about the place of religious faith in natural law theory? Well, most, although not all, most, throughout history and today, most natural law theorists are theists. They believe that the moral order, like every other order in human experience, is what it is because God creates and sustains it as such. In accounting for the intelligibility of the created order, they infer the existence of a free and creative intelligence, a personal God, the God of the Bible. Indeed, they typically argue that God's creative free choice provides the only ultimately satisfactory account of the existence of the intelligibilities humans grasp in every domain of inquiry, not just the moral domain. The domain of the natural world and the natural sciences and so forth, the social world, the social sciences, in mathematics, in logic, in technology, the application of the human intellect to the problem solving that's required, the technique that is required to get the bridge built or get the house built or solve whatever the problem is. Now, natural law theorists do not deny that God can reveal moral truths, and most believe that God has chosen to reveal many such truths. However, natural law theorists also affirm that many moral truths, including some that are also revealed, can be grasped by ethical reflection, even apart from revelation. They assert, with St. Paul, that there is a law, as it were, written on the hearts, even of the Gentiles who do not know the law of Moses, a law the knowledge of which is sufficient for moral accountability. So the basic norms against murder and theft, for example, though revealed in the Decalogue, are known even apart from God's special revelation. The natural law can be known to us, the moral law, moral truth, the basic reasons we have for action. The natural law can be known to us, and we can conform our conduct to its terms, if we have the will to do it, by virtue of our natural human capacities for deliberation, judgment, and choice, those godlike powers of intellect and freedom. The absence of a divine source of the natural law would be a puzzling thing, just as the absence of a divine source of any and every other intelligible order in human experience would be a puzzling thing. The laws of physics, the laws of logic, what have you. An atheist's puzzlement might well cause him to reconsider the idea that there is no divine source of the order we perceive and understand in the in the universe. It's far less likely, I think, to cause someone to conclude that our perception is illusory or that our understanding is a sham, though that is logically possible. Many people have moved from unbelief to belief by reflecting precisely on the puzzle of how there could be intelligibilities in the various orders of our experience, absent a divine source and ground of those intelligibilities. The question then arises, can natural law, assuming that there are truly principles of natural law, provide some measure of common moral and even political ground for people who do not agree on the existence of God, or the nature of God, or the role of God in human affairs? Well, in my view, anybody who acknowledges the human capacities for reason and freedom has good grounds, good rational grounds for affirming human dignity and basic human rights, whether you believe in God or not, or whatever your understanding of the divine is. These grounds remain in place, whether or not one even adverts to the question, is there a divine source of the moral order whose tenets we discern in inquiry regarding natural law and natural rights? Now, I happen to think personally that the answer to that question is yes, and that we should be open to the possibility that God has revealed himself in ways that reinforce and supplement what can be known by unaided reason. But we do not need agreement on the answer so long as we agree about the truths that give rise to the question, namely, that human beings possessing godlike, literally awesome powers of reason and freedom are bearers of profound dignity that is protected by certain human rights. That's what human rights do. They protect the dignity of the human being. They guard the good of the human being. So if there is a set of moral norms, including norms of justice and human rights, that can be known by rational inquiry, understanding, and judgment, even apart from special revelation, then these norms of natural law can provide the basis for a common understanding of human rights, an understanding that can be shared even in the absence of religious agreement. Now, of course, we should not expect consensus. There are moral skeptics, as I've said already, who deny that there are any moral truths. There are religious fideists who hold of different traditions of faith, who hold that moral truths cannot be known apart from God's special revelation. And even among those who believe in natural law, an objective moral order that's graspable by human deliberation, judgment, understanding, there will be differences of opinion about its precise content and its implications for certain issues. We natural law theorists have all sorts of important debates amongst ourselves. So it is, I believe, our permanent condition to discuss and debate these issues, both as a matter of abstract philosophy and as, of course, as a matter of practical politics. Now I want to talk about some challenges to natural law philosophy. It's sometimes regarded as an embarrassment or something of an embarrassment to natural law thinking that some great ancient and medieval figures in the natural law tradition failed to recognize, indeed some have even denied, human rights that are affirmed by contemporary natural law theorists and even regarded as fundamental. Aristotle believed in natural slavery. Medieval thinkers were not keen, at least on what emerged as the modern understanding of religious freedom and so forth. Consider that one. Consider the right to religious freedom. This right was not widely acknowledged in the past. It's not that it was unknown, even in its more developed sense, but it was not widely acknowledged in the past and was certainly denied by some prominent natural law theorists. As Professor Finnis has observed, they wrongly believed that a wide conception of liberty in matters of faith presupposed religious relativism or indifferentism, or entailed that religious vows were immoral or non-binding because you couldn't bind your intellect against future changes of minds, or they entailed the comprehensive subservience of ecclesial communities, the church, to the state. It's interesting that when the Catholic Church put itself on record firmly in support of a robust understanding of the right to religious liberty in the Second Vatican Council in the document Dignitatis Humanae, it presented two arguments. First, the first part of the document, a natural law argument, and then the second, an argument from specifically theological sources. The natural law argument for religious liberty, which is quite a good one, I find it quite persuasive, is founded on the obligation of each person to pursue the truth about religious matters and to live in conformity with his conscientious judgment. So the right to religious liberty is not defended there on the ground that there is no religious truth, or all religions are equally true, or all religions are equally false, or religion doesn't matter, we can be indifferent to it. No, it's actually founded on the obligation. The right to religious liberty is founded on the obligation of the person to seek the truth in matters of religion. This obligation is in turn rooted in the proposition that religion, considered as conscientious truth-seeking regarding the ultimate sources of meaning and value, and the effort to get one's life in line with true judgments on matters of religion, is a crucial dimension of human well-being and fulfillment. You might have noticed that when I gave a non-exhaustive list earlier of basic human goods, of things that provide reasons for action, I mentioned religion as one of them, moved very quickly past that. Now, of course, some of our atheist friends, my old pal Richard Dawkins, for example, at Oxford, would stop right there and say, wait a minute, you're treating religion as good. Religion's not good, religion's bad, religion's evil, look at all the bad religion has done. But what I mean, and what the document of the Second Vatican Council means by religion here, is conscientious truth-seeking about ultimate matters and the effort to lead one's life in conformity with one's best judgments as to what is true on the great questions of meaning and value that are indeed ultimate. And that provides a basic reason for our action. So religion, in that sense, even an atheist can understand, is among the basic human goods, the goods that provide the ends or purposes that provide rational motivation for our choosing. The right to religious liberty then follows from the dignity of man as a conscientious truth seeker, thus the title of the document, Dignitatis Humanae, human dignity. This right and other rights are denied, of course, today and attacked from various quarters. In many parts of the world, they are routinely violated. Dr. Sleesman kindly mentioned that among my experience in public service was serving as chairman of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. That was hard and difficult, and in some ways demoralizing work, demoralizing in part because so much of the population of the world today continues to live under regimes that oppress people because of their faith or their beliefs. So the right to religious freedom, a profound, important human right rooted in the good of conscientious truth-seeking in religion, is routinely violated. And the ideological justification for the violation can be, and if we look at the world, I noticed this when I was chairing the commission, religious or secular. You find religious people violating human rights in the name, the right to religious liberty in the name of religion. You find secular people violating human rights because they're opposed to religion. In some parts of the world, religious freedom and other basic human rights are denied in the name of theological truths. In other parts of the world, the threats are from secularist ideologies. Just compare and contrast Iran and China, two tremendous human rights violators of the right to the free exercise of religion or religious liberty. One atheistic and communist, the other religious Islamist. Where secularist ideologies are liberal in form, in the West, for example, it's often claims to an overarching right to personal autonomy or a corrupted version of the true right to have one's equal dignity respected that are asserted to justify choices and actions or policies that natural law theorists believe are unjust and undermine the common good, often violations of human rights. If the natural law view of these matters is correct, then it is moral failings conspiring with intellectual errors that sustain ideologies that compromise human rights. In a certain sense, the failings, the going wrong, is at opposite poles. Yet, from a natural law vantage point, partisans of the competing ideologies make valid criticisms of each other. Radical Islamists, for example, and we shouldn't treat Islam itself as radical Islamism. I'm talking about radicals who claim the mantle of Islam and engage in acts of violence and violations of human rights, harshly condemn the decadent features of cultures in which the me generation ideology of it feels good, do it, flourishes. On the other side, ideological progressives in the West, largely secular West, denounce the subjugation of women and the oppression of religious dissenters, where fundamentalists in religion hold sway. Iran, again, for example, or Saudi Arabia. As natural law theorists see it, threats to human dignity and human rights exist because all of us as human beings are imperfectly reasonable and imperfectly moral. To put it in Christian terms, we are fallen creatures, sinners. At the same time, hope exists because we really do possess the capacities for reasonableness and virtue. Truth, including moral truth, is accessible to us, and it has its own splendor and powerful appeal. It's luminous. We still see it, and at some level, we still want it. Now, of course, we will never, in this vale of tears, grasp the truth completely about moral matters or others, or in a way that is entirely free from errors. It's not given to us to do that. Our powers may be godlike, we're not God. Nor will we, frail, fallen, fallible human beings, ever fully live up to the moral truths we grasp. Man will never be perfected such that he lives a fully moral life. But just as we made progress by abolishing the evil of slavery, by ending legally sanctioned racial segregation here in the United States and elsewhere, by recognizing the right to religious freedom, by turning away from the eugenics policies once favored by so many respectable, influential, highly educated, sophisticated, progressive people, natural law theorists hope that we can make genuine progress and reverse declines in other areas, including in the defense of human life, which is so central to the mission of the Center for Bioethics and Human Dignity. Now, of course, people who reject the natural law understanding of human dignity and human rights will differ from natural law theorists on questions of what constitutes progress and decline. From a radical religious fundamentalist point of view, the type of religious freedom defended by natural law theorists will be regarded as licensing heresy and religious irresponsibility. When we talked, when I was chairing the commission, when we talked to officials in places like Saudi Arabia, we got that message loud and clear. Natural law ideas then will be seen as just rhetorically toned down forms of Western secularism, liberal secularism. By contrast, from a progressive secularist point of view, natural law ideas about abortion, sexuality, and other hot button moral issues will be regarded as intolerant and oppressive, a philosophically gussied up form of religious fundamentalism. You've all heard that trope. In the end, though, natural law ideas, like radical religious fundamentalist ideas or liberal secularist fundamentalist ideas, will have to stand or fall on their own merits. All we can do is make the argument, listen to the argument, consider the reasons, the evidence, and make a judgment. Anyone who wonders whether the arguments on any side are sound or unsound will just have to consider the arguments and the support that's offered for them and the counter arguments that are advanced by critics. Natural law theories, I want to say just a couple more things before I close. I'm getting near the end of my time. One of the things I thought I'd share with you are some thoughts about the respects in which natural law theories are like and unlike the two leading competitors in the domain of ethical analysis. These being utilitarianism and the view that's sometimes called Kantianism or deontology or deontologism. There are respects in which natural law theory is both like and unlike utilitarian or consequentialist approaches to morality on the one hand, and Kantian or deontological approaches on the other. Like utilitarian approaches, and unlike Kantian ones, natural law theories are fundamentally concerned with human well-being and fulfillment, and indeed identifying principles directing our choosing toward basic human goods and away from their privations as the starting points of ethical reflection. It's good oriented, it's teleological in that sense. Unlike utilitarian approaches, however, natural law theorists understand the basic forms of human good as they figure in options for morally significant choosing, as incommensurable in ways that render senseless the utilitarian strategy of choosing the option that overall and in the long run is supposed to promise the net best proportion of benefit to harm, however benefit and harm may be understood and defined. And as you know, different utilitarians understand and define benefit and harm differently. There are old-fashioned Benthamite hedonistic utilitarians, and there are utilitarians who take a very different view of the nature of the human good and think it can't be reduced to pleasure and pain. Natural law theorists share with Kantians the rejection of aggregative accounts of morality that regard the achievement of sufficiently good consequences or the avoidance of sufficiently bad ones as justifying choices that would be excluded by application of moral principles in ordinary circumstances. Unlike Kantians, however, they do not believe that moral norms can be identified, justified, apart from a consideration of the integral directiveness of the principles of practical reason directing human choice and action towards what is humanly fulfilling, the human good, and away from what is contrary to it. Natural law theorists, in other words, do not believe in purely deontological moral norms. There's a teleological dimension to the theory. It's good oriented. Practical reasoning then is reasoning about both the right and the good, and the two are connected. The content of the human good shapes norms, moral norms, inasmuch as those norms are entailments of the basic aspects of well-being and fulfillment, human well-being and fulfillment considered integrally. It's the good of the human being in the end that it's all about. The right is not, as Professor Rawls would have us believe, prior to the good. If anything, the reverse is true. It's the good and our understanding of the good that shapes our grasp of human rights and the right more generally, of right and wrong. Now, such a view, the natural law view, of course, presupposes the possibility of free choice, that is, choosing which is the pure product neither of external forces nor internal but subrational motivating factors such as sheer desire, Hume's the passions. So a complete theory of natural law will include an account of principles of practical reason, including moral norms, as principle for the rational guidance of free choices, and a defense of free choice as a genuine possibility. That's a metaphysical question that's got to be addressed because it is implicated in our understanding or any hope we might have of understanding natural law. Now, this entails the rejection of strict rationalism, according to which all phenomena are viewed as caused, and it understands human beings, some human beings, at least some of the time, as capable of causing realities that they bring into existence for reasons, not just things that they happen to find themselves doing. They bring them into existence for reasons by free choices. So they're operating differently from lions and tigers and bears, or wasps or amoebas or what have you. On the natural law account of human action, freedom and reason are mutually entailed. If people were not really free to choose among options, free in the sense that nothing but the choosing itself settles the option that gets chosen, truly rationally motivated action would simply be impossible. Conversely, if rationally motivated action were not possible, the experience we have of freely choosing would be illusory. Now, just for a final point, a point stressed by natural law theorists, and that is the fact, or what we take to be the fact, that by our choices and actions, we human beings not only alter states of affairs in the world external to us, we not only change life out there, change things out there, change the world. It's different because we acted. We performed this act, and now things are different from what they would have been had we not performed the act. But also, at the same time, our choices and actions determine and constitute ourselves, for better or worse, as persons with a certain character. So our acts alter the world external to us, but they alter or reinforce us, our character, our selves as well. Recognition of this self-shaping, or what some philosophers call the intransitive quality of morally significant choosing, leads to a focus in the natural law tradition on virtues as habits born themselves of upright choosing that orient and dispose us toward further upright choosing, especially in the face of temptations which we will face to choose wrongly, to choose immorally, to choose unjustly. So people sometimes ask, is natural law about rules or virtues? Is it a rule theory or a virtue theory? Is it a rule ethics or a virtue ethics? Well, the answer, it seems to me, is that it is both, and unavoidably both, and couldn't be one without the other. A complete theory of natural law identifies norms for distinguishing right from wrong, as well as habits or traits of character, virtues, whose cultivation disposes people to choose in conformity with the norms and thus compatibly with what we might call, borrowing a phrase from Kant, a good will. That is, a will toward integral human fulfillment.